Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Our program will begin in just a couple of minutes. 2 minutes to showtime. If you'll take a moment and silence your devices as a courtesy to our presenters, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome to IndyFest 2024. Please welcome to the stage your host, John Ralston.
Hi, everybody who's here in person, and I think more people are coming in, and there's a lot of people who are here by Zoom as well. Welcome to IndyFest Day 2. Thanks to all of you who came last night to see Mark Wahlberg. That was a really fun conversation with him, and we have a great lineup. We're just going to get started with our first panel in a few minutes. We're going to cover a wide array of topics today, from polling to housing to school choice. I have to tell you, I'll say it again, I said it last night, this is the most successful event in the almost 8-year history of the Indy. And we are, as you know, a nonprofit, so I'm very, very happy about that. And you're going to see today the reason that we've been so successful, and that's the remarkable and talented Indy staff. They make it happen. It's not just me. Yeah, there you go. I'm just a pretty face, but I think that's obvious to everybody here. They're going to be co-moderating panels today. There's going to be a lot of them that you're going to see, and they're going to be the leaders on that. I'm just going to be sitting there occasionally, maybe in case anybody decides not to answer questions. I'll be the guy in the black hat. I would also be remiss in not thanking some people besides our staff. Our revenue team has done a fantastic job putting this event together, along with Julie Schaefer and her team, who are here making the trains run on time and making sure that I look some reasonable facsimile of competent at this whole thing. I want to give a special shout out to Dawn Hamilton, who was our events person and who really made this thing happen. So give Dawn a round of applause. She's indispensable to the Indy. And I want to thank all the volunteers who came here to help us out, both in the front, you saw some of them, and around this event. And of course, I want to thank Station Casinos for hosting us at this beautiful venue, and they're also one of the sponsors. Some of you may have seen that there's index cards. I want you all to ask questions. Megan Riley, our great development person, will get the index cards from you if you have questions for any of the panelists, either before or during. We'll try to get all those answers. So before I start, this first panel, I do want to read the list of our sponsors. We are a nonprofit. For those of you who already are supporters, thank you. Increase your donation if you can. A little monthly support is what keeps us going. Journalism is not free, and it's more essential than ever. So here's a list of sponsors, and let's give them some applause at the end. I mentioned Station Casinos. This is most sponsors, by the way, we've ever had for any event. The Agassi Foundation, the A's, NV Energy, Western States Petroleum, Nevada Mining Association, the Raiders, UFC, Pharma, De Castroverde Law Group, Martin Harris Construction, Southwest Gas, Roseman University, Gold Coast Promotions, Brownstein Law Firm, Nevada Realtors, Core Construction, Emergency Management Foundation, and the Gwynn Center. Let's give them all a round of applause for supporting nonprofit journalism. So now let's get started. I'm going to bring out our reporter, Eric Neugeboren, and Brian Sandoval, who was the president of UNR and used to have some elected positions, I've been told. He's here too. And Dave Sackett is here by Zoom. Dave Sackett is one of the best pollsters in the country, and he really knows Nevada. He's from the Tarrance group. So thanks to both of you for coming. Dave, you can hear me all right? I don't think we can hear you. That's a problem. Are you muted? I cannot hear you. I can read your lips, but we cannot hear you. So maybe it's on our end. I'm not sure. This is a good way to start. Okay, on to the next panel. I'm kidding.
How's that?
That is better. We can hear you.
Go.
Welcome, Dave. So let's start. Dave has done some polling in Nevada recently, and the former governor and current president of UNR, part of something called the Democracy Defense Project. I think I have the name correct, and it's really, really important. And Dave, take us through, as briefly as you can, a series of slides so you can show the folks here what you found.
Sure. Just as a primer, the Democracy Defense Project was started about 16 months ago by a group of people who were terribly concerned that the electorate was demonstrating a lack of confidence in sort of electoral integrity and the electoral process. And the goal of the work that we've been doing is to sort of understand the truths that people believe. What are the concerns or worries that they have, if any, about the electoral process and electoral integrity? And what are the pieces of information that we can provide to them about the process, about the people who are running it, about the safeguards that can help them feel much better and much more comfortable about it? There have been, probably 25 or 30 focus groups done around the country with people, and we've learned a great deal. Also recognizing that about half the things that people want or believe would help make our elections safer and improve the integrity are things that are already being done. And so part of the process is just sort of educating people and informing them about things that are going on. But this is a piece of research that we did in the state of Nevada in early September, and I don't know if you can see the deck. I can't tell if the deck is up or not.
There it is, right?
Oh,
Yep,
okay.
there it is.
Sure,
It's
there
up
we go.
there. Yep.
Okay. And so we did a survey in September 14th through 19th, N equals 600 likely registered voters. And if we go to the next chart, we started out and said, okay, what are the truths that people believe about in Nevada about elections at a national level? And if you go to the next chart, we start out and just ask the question, how often confident would you say you are that votes will be accurately cast and counted in the 2024 elections? And amongst Nevada voters, 38% say very confident, 30% say somewhat confident, and you have about 31% who say that they're not particularly confident that elections at the national level will be cast and counted accurately. If you go to the next chart, you see, and this probably comes as no surprise to people, and I apologize, it's difficult to look at, that you look at Republican voters and they tend to be much more worried or concerned. You know, you have less than 1 in 10 Democrats who say that they're not at all confident. You have only about 1/3 of independents. And so it really is the Republican voters, not surprisingly, who say that they're not confident in the elections at the national level. You go to the next chart. We say, okay, well, do you think in 2024, after what happened or what you perceive to have happened in 2020, do you think that the elections this time will be conducted doing a better job about the same job or not as good of a job? And you can see that people do have a sense that even if they had deep concerns about 2020, that they believe that things will get better. Almost half of the electorate says that they think that they'll do a better job, and there's only about 7% who don't believe they'll do as good of a job. Next chart. And this is where we get into what I think Governor Sandoval and I were most pleased about, is that when you look at the way people view elections in Nevada, they're fairly significantly different. If you go to the next chart, we asked exactly the same question. Okay, how confident are you that here in Nevada, votes will be accurately cast and counted? 45% very confident, and again, only about 15% say not confident. So you look at the next chart, and that's sort of really the tail of the tape. In the people, there's a 7 points higher in terms of very confident about the elections in Nevada, and a dramatic difference. While 31% say they're not confident about elections across the country, only 14% say that they're not confident about elections in Nevada, which I think is great news and a real testament to all the work that's being done by a lot of very honorable and honest folks. If you go to the next chart, you'll see that, you look at the Republicans, and at a national level, only 11% would say very confident, and 48% not at all. But look at Nevada. You have 16% that are very confident, another 53% are somewhat confident. Only about 1 in 4 Republicans say that they're not confident about the elections in Nevada. So there's a dramatic difference, particularly amongst Republican voters and how they view elections there in the state than across the country as a whole. Go to the next chart. Oh, flip on to the next one if we could. The other thing that we found very gratifying is when we say, okay, here's 2 views of election workers and election officials. Number one, that they're important volunteers in our community who count fairly and need to be able to do their job without interference. A majority of voters in the state, 53%, if you go back for 1 second, said that they thought that that was the case. Other people say that election workers and officials are more partisan than you would like. That's not a particularly strongly held view. You have less than 4 in 10 who believe that to be the case. Now we go on to the next chart. John will tell you and lectures us all the time, truth is what people believe. And so.
Uh-oh. Go ahead, John. Hang on a second, Dave. We lost you again. I apologize to everybody.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Good.
You're back. You're back.
Oh, I'm back. Great.
Yep.
Okay. In all the research that had been done across the country and focus groups and things like that, we gathered a number of sort of perceived worries or concerns about the election integrity system. And we asked people each one of these and asked them how serious of a potential problem that was in their perception. And you see that, the top one is that media organizations that suppress and support stories while exaggerating or distorting the views, 51.
Uh-oh. Silent Dave has returned.
4 in 10 who are extremely worried or concerned about any of those. And if you go to the next chart, this was sort of the most telling thing, and I think very significant for all of us to remember. If you look at, and again, these are the truths that people believe, not facts, but if you look at the three sort of tier one potential or perceived threats, none of those three has anything to do with the election system in the state of Nevada or any election officials in the state of Nevada. When you ask people, what are they most worried about? They're worried about media organizations suppressing or exaggerating. They're worried about AI manipulating or creating misinformation. They're worried about foreign adversaries spreading propaganda. None of those have anything to do with the manner in which ballots or second tier of the threat, people who are ineligible or not registered being allowed to vote, and a lack of voter ID making it easier for people to cast multiple ballots. But at the end of the day, it's really things that are entirely outside the control or the purview of the state, of the election process in the state, that folks are most worried about. We go to the next chart. Um, uh, then we got to and said, okay, let's look at a variety of different proposals. And we learned fairly early on in the process that this is new information to virtually everyone. There are probably 25 people in this room that understand and look and say, well, wait a minute, the state of Nevada already does half of these things. But it's important to sort of understand or recognize that just because they're being done doesn't mean that the electorate knows about it, and reinsuring and reinforcing them about these things being done. Look at how strong the reaction is amongst the electorate. Would you be more likely or less likely to believe that Nevada elections will be conducted fairly and accurately based on each of these proposals? And you look and see that 90% say they would come to believe that the election process would be have much greater integrity if paper ballots were secured in locked locations. Over 80% say they'd be more likely, knowing that there's independent testing of voting machines, requiring state officials to use multi-state databases to check for registrations. 83% more likely. The state of Nevada already does that. Requiring that all ballot drop boxes, be monitored by video and things like that. And then go on to the next chart. And what was most gratifying was when you look and say, okay, what are the biggest or most important reforms in people's minds? So that if you were going to go and chat with somebody or talk to the public and say, look, our elections have extraordinary integrity. They are going to be fair and accurate. If you know that, yes, we keep paper ballots in locked facilities. Yes, we make sure that our voting machines are not connected to the internet. Yes, we do independent testing of voting machines before the start of voting. And yes, we require officials to use a database to check for duplicate registrations. Look at how strong those numbers are overall, number one, and then go to the final chart. And the thing that was most gratifying to both Governor Sandoval and I, not to put words in his mouth, look at the numbers amongst the Republicans. I mean, the Republicans have the strongest positive reactions to these, as do the portion of the electorate that says that they don't really have a great deal of confidence. And so the idea or notion that the elections are not, don't have the integrity, don't have the controls that are in place is really based on sort of a lack of information and not a preconceived notion that no matter what you say, I'm not going to believe you, because they're all eminently persuadable. And we found this very gratifying and really just the process of delivering some very simple messages about the safeguards that are already in place can do a great deal to help us. And that's sort of a brief summary of the data. I know I've nodded on probably too long, and I apologize, but that's sort of what we found.
No, we appreciate all the data. Dave, you can still hear me?
Absolutely, John. Yeah.
Okay, this data is great. I'm going to bring Eric in to start off the questioning with Governor Sandoval in a second, but I will just say that even though I have tremendous respect for you as a pollster and your track record here is great, your record of pronouncing the state's name correctly needs work.
Yeah.
Nevada.
It's how we do it. It's how Canadians pronounce it, John. Yeah. But I would also like to say to everybody who is here that I have been a ardent consumer of John Ralston since the very beginning, and there are not many reporters that you can say that about who are fair and accurate and bright. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. But I hope everybody understands what an extraordinary contribution he makes to sort of the truth in politics, and we appreciate that.
Thanks for that, Dave. All right, Eric, you're up.
Thank you, John. So Governor Sandoval, as Dave was saying, the poll results really seem to indicate that if more people were fully aware of how Nevada elections worked, then they would have more confidence in the system. I'm curious, though, with just the way the world works right now, misinformation seems to be spreading like wildfire online, and not just about elections. Is it hard for election officials to overcome that spread of misinformation and ensure that the public gets information from trusted sources? And how does that kind of fit into the Democracy Defense Project's goal and strategy in reaching people?
Yeah. First, John, Eric, thank you for having me. It's a privilege and honor to be here, and Dave is so eloquent and has done such a great job. And the answer to your question is it's hard. There's no doubt that it's hard, because given with social media now and all the messaging that's going out there. But I really do want to start with complimenting our Secretary of State, the Nevada Secretary of State, Cisco Aguilar. I think he has been to every county. He's been very active in the last session of the legislature. He's very active now, being out there on social media, being here in Las Vegas, all over the state, talking about the quality of our election system that we have in our state. I know I was with him not long ago at the Washoe County Voter Registrar's office, and all the things that Dave has talked about, they have in place there. The latest technology, the ballot security, the demonstration that the machines are tested and not connected to the internet. So that's part of the responsibility that I've taken on as being the co-chair with Speaker Perkins of the Democracy Defense Project, to really demonstrate to the people of the state of Nevada that they can have complete confidence in their electoral system and everything that happens with the Secretary of State and with the voter registrars.
And you mentioned Secretary Aguilar going across the state, talking to voters, being on social media. I'm curious what you think the most effective ways in getting this information out there are, because I assume at times you have to go to the voters themselves rather than expect them to come to you. For example, a town hall in a rural county, it's still expecting voters who seek out this information and want to be more informed to get that information. How do you think the public officials can best serve the public by reaching voters where they are?
Yeah. Well, I think you got to fight fire with fire and be out there on social media. And again, I can give an example of Secretary of State Aguilar coming to the campus of the University of Nevada and meeting with the students. He did a town hall on campus that was very well attended. He walked the students through a lot of the issues that have been exhibited on the poll, and you can see the students nodding and feeling better about it. We have been very active on our campus. We do have a polling place on our campus. We have a very active voter registration activity going on campus to get our students registered to vote, and we will be a polling place on election day. So again, I know not only has he done that there, he's done that in many parts of the state. And I know that the voter registrar's office in Washoe County is very well engaged, and I suppose I know anecdotally that the same activity is happening here in Clark County and throughout the state.
Eric, let me just jump in. First of all, tell everybody here that if you don't know, the Secretary of State will be up here on this stage later this morning to talk about voting issues, and we're thrilled that he'll be here. But let me just, Eric, ask Dave a question here, because Eric's questions get it, and your data, Dave, get at some of things that are going on. The misinformation, the fact that people believe what they want to believe seems to be one of the biggest threats to democracy. So how do you pierce that? What messages work?
Well, I mean,
What messengers work?
yeah, I guess I could make a cogent argument, John, that it is not that it is a perception based of lack of awareness or lack of knowledge. And you know, you sort of, if you treat this like a political campaign and you say, okay, how many of you people here are worried about election integrity and think that there are problems? Okay, here's just four things I want you to remember. In 2024, we've made sure, and everybody's making sure, every single paper ballot is going to be locked in a storage facility. Number two, that every single voting machine is going to be independently checked before the elections start and before voting goes on. And number two, every single voting machine is going to be locked away so that it cannot be connected to the internet. And then finally, you know, we're going to make sure that people have to show identification so that people who are not registered to vote, who are not eligible, are able to vote. And that's what our election is going to look like in 2024. Forget about backwards, but I would reckon that you know, 3.7 of those 4 pieces of information is new to these people. And you know, even the most hardcore, most ardent you know, doubters in the data were fairly easily persuadable. If we had sort of done that series on those proposals and these people were intractable, then, you know, none of them would have said, well, I'd be more likely. But the more likelies were very, very high, which suggests that you're filling in gaps as opposed to having to change their mind.
And kind of going off of what John was mentioning about how people believe what they want, or people believe what they want to be true and kind of seek out information that confirms their biases. Just going back to you, Dave, there was an interesting finding in the poll that I don't think was on this slide deck, but for the audience, there was a question about whether members of a particular party was worried that the other party would engage in some kind of election irregularities this cycle. And 61% of Democrats said they were worried about this type of behavior from Republicans, and 70% of Republicans were worried about this type of behavior from Democrats. I'm curious if you can speak a little bit about that finding and what you think that reveals about the partisanship nature of this topic.
I don't know that it reveals a huge deal. You know, if you ask the question, do you believe that people who are in the private equity business cheat on their taxes? It's sort of an assumption, or there is you know, there's sort of a fundamental concern that people are going to try shenanigans, and it's based on something that you see that occurs in Chicago, or something that occurs in Detroit, or something that occurs in Los Angeles. And I think part of what the governor and the speaker had pointed out, and what you know, what the data shows us is, look, they may believe that these things occur in other places, but we do a much better job and we're much more honest here in the state of Nevada. And so they wouldn't have those same level of concerns about the elections in our state. And so they're sort of projecting. Nobody in the state of Nevada has any control or influence over.
And Governor Sandoval, just kind of going back to the topic we were talking about earlier about reaching people, what would you say are the biggest challenges in reaching people? I know just from my experience, it's a lot easier to scroll on social media and see accounts that you think may kind of conform with what you believe, rather than going to a town hall with the state elections official. So do you, in your work so far with the Democracy Defense Project, have you faced any challenges in reaching people?
Yeah, a couple things, and I want to go back to what Dave was talking about, because I do believe a dose of skepticism is a good thing. And that means that the voters are engaged, they're asking questions, they're trying to get informed. But in terms of the Democracy Defense Project and the speaker, and I have been very active, and again, going to the voter registrar's office in Washoe County, getting on media. We've been on several shows like this. I mean, obviously this is the biggest one with the largest audience, but in any event.
He's still quick.
This is part of what we're doing here, is really providing, a venue and an audience to show these results of this poll. I mean, we have a pollster who's one of the most respected pollsters in the country, who asks the right questions, that has the authority and the reputation, so that when people see these things, they understand. And I'm like Dave, I'm really pleased that the likely, you get to the more likelies once you provide this information about what's going on in the state of Nevada. And there is not a lot of time between now and the election day. Early voting starts tomorrow. I think we're in a good place, and we'll continue to work until the end of the election.
And kind of digging a bit deeper into the poll results, Governor Sandoval, when I spoke with you for the story that we wrote about these poll results, you seemed encouraged that the trust in state level elections was higher than in national elections, because that's the focus of your role with the Democracy Defense Project. There were also findings, though, that showed, even though this was higher than the national level, 16% of Republicans in Nevada said they were very confident in the state's elections. I'm curious, given that you are a former Republican governor in the state, I would probably assume that many of these respondents were people who elected you into office. Your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on that perspective from people, and whether what would be your message to people who maybe voted for you in the past but have this hefty skepticism?
Well, same thing. I would encourage them and urge them to really do their due diligence, and instead of on Twitter or being on X and going through social media, get the facts. And when you understand what the facts are, it's exactly what's happening on this poll. I think understand, and it's kind of that aha moment. Certainly, as Dave has said, there's going to be a group of people that are intractable, and no matter what you say, they are not going to move. But once you see all these things in terms of, again, what Dave talked about, that the ballot security, I think that's the biggest one, that when those mail-in ballots come in, and I saw it for myself, they're behind a locked cage that has very limited access, that you have to get badged in to be the room. There's a glass room where people can watch. There's cameras that are watching the entire time. I have always felt good and confident, but when I saw it for myself, I even felt better. And that is the message that needs to be conveyed to those voters that you talk about.
And kind of going into the future a little bit, not just for this election, but for beyond this election, you mentioned we only have a few weeks until the election, and I'm sure that troubles most people in here. But I'm curious, thinking long term, there are obviously groups like the DDP that is making a concerted effort to encourage people to seek out trusted information and encourage trust in these democratic institutions. But technologies are also getting stronger very rapidly, with AI and deepfakes that can threaten to overwhelm the information ecosystem. So thinking long term about the information ecosystem as it relates to things like trust in elections and trust in democratic institutions, would you say you're optimistic or pessimistic about what the future entails?
I'm always optimistic, but I'll say this. Good, thank you. But I think this is a great opportunity. We have this election cycle. We're going to have election day, and I think when all the ballots are counted, there's going to be a validation of this poll, and you're going to see that we're going to have an incredible election where everyone feels really good about it. But as you say, as you move on, technology, who knows where that's going to take us and the challenges that's going to bring. But this election, and we're fortunate here in the state, we're going into a legislative session. And what happens will inform the Secretary of State, who will go to the Nevada legislature. And if there are things that need to be done to improve and make our electoral system even better, they'll do that. So, it's hard to speculate. Who knows what technology is capable, but I think our Secretary of State, our state's up to the task.
Eric, let me jump in and ask Dave a question and maybe shockingly counter some of the governor's optimism, which is this. Dave, it occurs to me that maybe this has started too late, that if it had started earlier, it might have had more of an impact. And isn't it all going to be erased if after Election Day there are loud cries from a leader of a party, from enablers, from other elected officials talking about how the election was stolen or there are too many irregularities? Is the boulder going to roll back over everybody, I guess, after November 5th?
Well, I mean, number one, you've already had the experience of this, and not that people get numb, but once you've seen it, you start to get a little bit used to it. Look, at the end of the day, you take away the facts, and what was the biggest problem? The biggest problem was that Americans have been used to going to bed on election night knowing who their president was. And in 2020, I think the biggest challenge is as we've moved to absentee and mail-in ballots across the country, the issue of whether they can be counted before the polls close or not is a huge problem, because there were a lot of people that went to bed and the world looked one way, and they woke up the next day and the world looked another way. And I'm not a legislator, I'm not a policy person, but I think that a lot of this frustration that the American public sort of demonstrates is, why does it, I don't understand why it takes 4 days now to know who won the election. And ergo, there must be some shenanigans going on when there are just a lot more ballots that have come in by other means and sources. And so ultimately, if we're able to fix that, if the networks and people are sort of more cautious and less willing to, call a state or things like that, and be more honest about how things are kind of up in the air, and we're almost certainly headed back to something like that again. I don't think anybody will go to bed on election night, even folks out in your time zone, knowing who won this election. But I think that's where a lot of the frustration and uncertainty comes from.
And John, I was going to move on to just what we can expect in the next few weeks, unless there's anything else you want to chat about election security.
No, go ahead.
So, Dave, I'm sure there are people in this room and people watching that have been feverishly checking polls for any kind of insight, and will continue to do so in the next couple of weeks. As a pollster, do you have any advice for people of how much to read into a certain poll? I mean, a member of my family,
I have a good piece of advice, and John and I have talked about this often. If you are a junkie, your best friend should be something called Real Clear Politics. And I would not take any specific or singular poll for granted, but what Real Clear Politics does is that it aggregates all of the polls. And so it looks at 12 polls in Wisconsin, and invariably there's going to be one where Trump is winning by 11 gajillion points, and there's going to be another where Vice President Harris is winning by 38 gajillion points, and it flattens them all out so that you do tend to get some accuracy. The other thing that's been difficult this cycle is that everybody is trying to, build a submarine for $12. And so they're doing these multi-state polls where they're trying to poll people in 6 or 7 states at the same time. And they're being careful in terms of the methodology overall, but not of the individual states. And so, no one recognized that you've got to, don't take any single poll, my poll, anybody's poll, and say, okay, that's the truth. Always look at those averages, and those averages will tend to do sort of quite a good job. I mean, look, we are, mathematically, this election right now is absolutely a coin toss. I mean, I might give, Trump, half a rotation advantage, but if you look at the 7 battleground states, forget about the national data. Look at the 7 battleground states. And in those 7 battleground states, Trump has a lead in 4 of them, but that lead is a mean average of 0.43% of the vote. Vice President Harris has a lead in 3 of them, and that lead is a mean average of 0.173. And so, honest to goodness, every one of these 7 battleground states is flat tie and is not going to break until late. And so this will largely be the turnout election. But anybody, no matter how bright or sophisticated they are, that tells you they know what is going to happen is having to just sort of make it up right now.
And you mentioned these kinds of polls that poll all swing states in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there is anything about Nevada that makes it different or perhaps even more difficult to accurately
Sure, no,
poll?
a lot of times there would be a lot of states where you would look and say, okay, I want to make sure that the 600 interviews that I do in Nevada looks like the electorate. And so I can get the ages right, and I can get the percentage of the electorate that is Hispanic Latino right, and things like that. And John has seen this a great deal. What they tend to get wrong is when they balance out partisanship, either registration or party ID or things like that. The Clark County and the Las Vegas DMA numbers are 2 Republican, and the Reno DMA and the Washoe County numbers are 2 Democrat. And so you sort of get this, kind of stilted view, number one. And number two, you have to recognize that Nevada voters are a little tougher to reach because you have so many people who are on, shift work and working different hours and things like that. And so where typically in a state, you would only do interviews between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. local time, knowing that you could get a hold of or be able to chat with everybody in Nevada. And Mark Mellman, who's another brilliant guy on the Democratic side, I actually stole this from him. They'll do a lot of daytime interviewing and early morning interviewing and that sort of stuff to make sure that they're able to capture all the people who are doing shift work. And so if you're only talking to people between 5 and 9, there's 1 out of 5 voters in that state that are not going to be available, and you're going to miss them.
Dave, we'll come back to you in a second about polling. Eric, I want to ask the governor a question. This made me a little curious. You've kind of spent your whole career being the voice of reason when partisan winds are blowing, and it's gotten tougher to do that in the world since you started in politics, since I started covering politics. You got plenty to do with UNR. There's a lot of issues there too. You're a busy guy. What made you decide to take this on, knowing how difficult it was going to be, consider everything else? I mean, did you say yes right away, and did you say, oh no, I don't want to get into this again?
No, I did say yes right away, and I've been troubled about what I have seen through the years, and in the amount of the increase, I should say, in the distrust in the outcome of the election, and particularly what happened, in the last presidential election. So I saw this as an opportunity to really display what we're doing in Nevada and try to dispel these myths and rumors and false beliefs and show, that I have complete confidence in what's happening in our electoral system, in our Secretary of State, the reforms that they've done and that they've implemented and the demonstrations that they've made, so that at least in our state, we can have complete confidence in our election.
Have you, I know you walk around campus a lot and you talk to the students there. Do they bring any of this up? I'm wondering if, this is a problem with certain cohorts we know about. Well, how do young people feel that you talk to about this whole thing?
No, and thank you, John, for asking that, because they do ask similar questions what we're seeing on the poll. And I mentioned previously that we had done a town hall on campus with the Secretary of State. And recently there had been some reporting on the removal of the non-residents, from the voter rolls, as well as the signature validation. And, I'm really proud of our students because they're incredibly engaged and they asked some very informed questions, but some of them were concerned about the fact that there were several hundred people lined up who wanted to turn in their signatures personally versus mailing them, and asking the Secretary of State, what kind of security do you have, and what's going to be different this time from last time. So yes, they are asking those questions. As I said, there's a very concerted effort by our student government on campus to get students registered to vote and vote on election day. They've made sure that those students that are living in the dorms, that they can receive their mail-in ballots, something that didn't happen before. My understanding is that 70% or plus or more students on our campus are registered and will vote between now and election day. So yeah, no, the students are engaged, and I think you're going to see a big turnout.
Eric, let me. We only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure I get Dave on the record because he's going to tell us right now who's going to win Nevada. Now he's gone suddenly, conveniently.
For the
Hang
governor?
on, Dave. We missed the first part of that. We missed the first part. Seriously. Go ahead.
No, I said you were cutting in and out. I was asking,
Oh.
is that a question for the governor or for me?
No, it's for you. Who's going to win Nevada, Dave? I know you can tell us today definitively.
Right now, today in Nevada, former President Trump has a 0.3 lead, which is virtually nothing. If I had to say today, I try and make decisions based on what I know, not what I think. What I know is that the Democratic Party has demonstrably done a better job on voter turnout than the Republican Party has, and this is going to be a turnout election. I guess I would, I sort of take evidence from other places, John, and one of the most fascinating things happened this morning. And this morning, if you look at the two of the most important U.S. Senate races in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Senator Casey in Pennsylvania and Senator Baldwin in Wisconsin, both put television commercials on the air on broadcast media talking about ways in which they had cooperated with and collaborated with former President Trump on legislation and efforts. And the idea or notion that an incumbent Democratic senator would make a spot in the last 2 weeks that would feature their collaborating with the former Republican president is almost unthinkable in the past. And so, I look at all those pieces, and I think that if I had to bet, I would bet Trump has a very narrow victory.
You heard it here first. But like a pundit, pollsters can reserve the right to say they changed their mind.
Yeah. And if Melman were here, look, there is the reason I'm most hesitant is that if you look at the mathematical argument that Vice President Harris and the Democratic Party would make, and it's a cogent argument, is look, how did Trump win the presidency in 2016? He won it because all of the double haters, the people that had an unfavorable impression of both candidates, not all of them, but there was a significant or dramatic increase in the number of people that cast a vote for a third-party candidate, Libertarian, Green, Unity Party, things like that. And so, Trump wins Wisconsin and Michigan by 20,000 votes, with over 80,000 votes in each of those states being cast for third-party candidates, because people thought, the conventional wisdom was, look, Secretary Clinton's going to win the election, so I can use my vote as a protest. We're seeing in all the data across everywhere that level of commitment to the third-party candidates is dramatically lower than it has been in the past. And so she and they would make the argument, and it's an entirely legitimate one, that a lot of those people in 2016 that not wasted, but cast their vote for a third-party candidate didn't count towards, they will vote for Vice President Harris in a binary choice, and that will provide her with the slim margins that she needs. But look, nobody can sit here and say that 2 weeks out, if you look at the blue wall, and the blue wall is the 3 states that the Democrats must win in order to make the math work, and that's Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And nobody would say that they would be particularly comfortable right now with the Democratic candidate having a mean average 0.0 advantage in those 3 blue wall states. That's a daunting task for them.
And I should tell everybody in here that one of the reasons that there's many reasons why Dave is so good at his job and why he's produced accurate results here, but most pollsters don't put none of these candidates as a choice on their polls, and I think that's a big mistake, and it may get more votes than usual this year. But Eric, I want to give the governor the final word here because I want us all to leave this panel feeling good. So, give us your optimistic message, why you're optimistic.
No, and you're asking about predictions. And my prediction is that when the election is over, at least here in the state of Nevada, that Nevadans will feel good about their electoral process and feel confident that in the integrity of our elections and that our Secretary of State and our voter registrars throughout the state of Nevada did a fantastic job.
Okay, good, yeah, clap for that, that's great. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't happen, then you will run for the U.S. Senate in the next. I'm kidding. Eric, thanks for showing everybody what a great reporter you are. Dave, thanks for coming on by Zoom. I'm sorry about the technical issues, and of course.
No. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and Governor, it's always a pleasure to see you. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Oh. Yeah.